latest from around the country and around the world. Early edition with the Maserati Levante SUV. Available now and going fast. Newstalk ZB.
5:20, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky joins Parliament by video call this morning. Jacinda Ardern says this is another opportunity for New Zealand to show our support for Ukraine in the midst of its ongoing conflict with Russia. The opposition are less than enthused, though, suggesting this may put us in an awkward position when more help for Ukraine is needed. International geopolitical analyst at Democracy Project is Geoff Miller and is with me this morning. Geoff, good morning to you. What should we expect to hear from Volodymyr Zelensky this morning?
Good morning. He's going to be asking for more. He's refreshingly direct in these speeches to foreign parliaments, so he's not going to be shy about asking for more support from New Zealand for Ukraine. So I think that's really what to look out for today. He's going to be gracious, but he is going to be asking for more.
Are we in a position to do anything more?
Well, the government has done a lot for Ukraine. We've introduced sanctions. We've given around about $30 million in aid. We're training Ukrainian soldiers over in the United Kingdom. But there's actually a lot more we could be doing, and I think he's going to be asking for that. New Zealand has been quite conspicuous in that it hasn't sent any more lethal aid, that is weapons, since April when we sent $7.5 million to the United Kingdom to purchase weapons on New Zealand's behalf. We haven't sent any more since then. And now Ukraine's been making some real gains on the battlefield, so in the last few months in particular. So the EU and the United States and other supporters have been adding more money to the kitty, and I think there will be calls from Zelensky for New Zealand to do the same. So that's, I think, something to watch out for.
The Finnish Prime Minister recently visited, of course, and emphasised the need for weaponry for Ukraine. Should we take this as a hint for what we should be doing next in our next assistance package? We don't have that kind of, we don't have the money, and we certainly don't have that weaponry, do we?
No, we don't have the weapons ourselves. Of course, there's always money that can be sent to purchase the weapons. Yes, Sana Marin, she called for hard power, and that's code for weapons, for lethal aid, for whatever euphemism that you like to use these days. And that, I think, will be the pressure that comes on New Zealand. I think New Zealand could do a lot more, though, in the humanitarian space, to be honest. There've only been 400 Ukrainian refugees who have come to New Zealand. The government only introduced a very limited work visa program for families of Ukrainians who are already living here, and it's been very hard to get those visas, and there's been very limited support for the Ukrainians who do actually arrive here. So I think there's a lot more we could do in that space. It's hard to know exactly how much more the government will move. There will be a lot of emotional buttons that Zelensky presses. When he gives these addresses to foreign parliaments, he really asks the countries to think about who they are. And if you go back to the speeches he gave, for example, to the US, he talked about 9/11 and Pearl Harbor. When he talked to the UK, he talked about the Battle of Britain in 1940. He's good at pushing his emotional buttons that are really specific to each country. So I think it's going to be fascinating today to see which of our buttons, our emotional buttons, does Volodymyr Zelensky press.
From a geopolitical point of view, we really have to be seen to be pulling our weight. You've just said we can do more. His speech will not be just a nice fluffy little speech. He'll be wanting more. He'll be demanding more. And how do you think our politicians will receive that message?
Well, I think it's really, really interesting. He's coming at the end of the year. He did a lot of these speeches in the first half of the year, particularly way back in March and April when the climate was quite febrile, really. Now at the end of the year, Ukraine has faded somewhat in our news. It's not necessarily leading the news bulletins, and we've kind of got used, sadly, to this war going on. So I think it's a chance for him to put Ukraine back at the top of our news agenda. Against that, though, we're, of course, heading into our Christmas and summer period, so there's not going to be a lot of time for debate about providing more support for Ukraine. And, the government may add some extra support. I'm sure they're aware that he's going to call for more support, and the government will probably throw some money Ukraine's way. But, I don't think we're going to see a huge shift from the government's current position.
On behalf of the organisation that you represent, Democracy Project, what are you expecting today? What would you guys like to see more than anything else?
I think it's the humanitarian assistance. I think it's if New Zealand sending more money for weapons and so forth. I mean, New Zealand's never going to make a huge difference in the weaponry. I think the humanitarian assistance is probably the best thing that we could do. And I think more broadly we need to think about the future of this war. Are we going to just keep going on like this? Russia is pounding these missiles into Ukrainian cities. It's making things pretty miserable. Ukraine is making some gains in the battlefield, but it is a real war of attrition at the moment. We could grind on for months, possibly years like this. And, there are millions of Ukrainians who have fled the country. There are thousands who have been killed on both sides. Do we actually want to continue with this war? Do we want to end it with a negotiated settlement? It has been talked about on both sides. Both Putin, both Joe Biden have mentioned the idea of negotiations. Perhaps we actually need to go there. And perhaps New Zealand's biggest achievement could be in that mediation space and bringing the parties to the table. But I haven't seen any appetite from Jacinda Ardern to lead those.
Oh, thank you so much for your input this morning. Geoffrey Miller, who's an international geopolitical analyst at Democracy Project. Thanks for your time. Exciting stuff. That happens this morning, by the way.